Our insiders are Chris Johnson, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger. Gentlemen, the trade deadline is a month from tomorrow. A number of teams like the Leafs are out shopping for a center right now. Is one about to become available in St. Louis, Dregs?
Well, some believe that there's potential of Brayden Schenn being traded by the St. Louis Blues. He is their captain. He does have a full no-trade clause, so it is a complicated process. But we also know Doug Armstrong, the general manager, very well, how aggressive he can be. And the Blues are underachieving right now. So yes, the top contenders looking at the market, looking for a center, are interested, and that would include the Toronto Maple Leafs. The return would have to be mammoth. Is there a team that is willing to pay it? It's too soon to say, but I do believe that the Blues are at least testing or gauging the market to see what that level of interest is, and ultimately will probably have to make that call in the weeks ahead.
Meanwhile, less than a week to puck drop of the Four Nations face-off. Team Canada's waiting to hear about its captain. CJ, Sidney Crosby got hurt and left the game Tuesday against the Devils. What's the latest news on him?
Well, do you want to start with the good news or the bad news? It's almost a weekend, so we'll go good news. He was on the ice in Pittsburgh on this day, was able to be skating on his own, did a couple drills with the team, but that is obviously an encouraging sign after he missed practice Wednesday. The bad news here, I would suggest, is just how secretive everyone around the situation is being. It's almost like they're guarding the nuclear codes when asked about Crosby's potential availability. And you can contrast that with other players like, say, Mitch Marner, who missed a game for the Maple Leafs this week. Everyone in that case was quick to say, don't worry, he's going to play. So this is still somewhat up in the air. I think there's a whiff of optimism behind the scenes, but until we hear anything definitively, this is a serious situation for Canada.
Hey, this is the time of year GMs try to reward their team that may be performing above expectations. Is that what's happening in Columbus now, Pierre?
Boy, you got that right, Gino. Is there more of a feel-good story than the resolve the Columbus Blue Jackets? They're battling through so many injuries. And in speaking with GM Don Waddell on Thursday, he said he's decided to try and be a moderate buyer here before March 7th, which is to say he's not going to get into the big names. Obviously, the long-term vision of the team still matters most. But with all these injuries and the way his players are battling, he feels he owes it to his group to go out and try and add a top-9 forward or rental player. He's obviously not going to want to trade either of his first-round picks. He's got 2 of them this year. But if he can add a player for a more moderate price, that's his plan, and he started making calls this week to do just that.
Hey, a boatload of big names are pending UFAs this July 1st. Guys like Marner and Rantanen, they're obviously drawing a lot of the chatter. But what about Brock Nelson, Pierre?
Yeah, that's one of the more intriguing situations right now ahead of the trade deadline. There are teams that would love to get into serious discussions with the New York Islanders on pending UFA Brock Nelson. They really have not yet. And the reason is no one is quite sure whether he's actually going to be available or traded by Isles GM Lou Lamoriello for a number of reasons. 1, the Isles are back in the playoff race. 2, Lou Lamoriello, regardless of the standings, hasn't always decided to trade his pending UFAs. And of course, 3, the Islanders may try to still and extend Brock Nelson potentially. Now, Nelson's agent, Ben Hankinson, is based in Minnesota. Just so happens the Islanders are there on Saturday. I would expect a meeting between the veteran GM and the agent. At this point, I don't think it's likely that Brock Nelson signs an extension. I think is more than likely headed to July 1st. Teams like Minnesota, Dallas, I don't think the Stars are done. Certainly the Winnipeg Jets, and I know the Leafs too have Brock Nelson on their list, all with a lot of interest in a guy like Brock Nelson, if he truly becomes available.
If he becomes available. Look, we know Ryan Hartman's appealing his 10-game suspension for driving Tim Stützle's face into the ice. This process usually crawls along. But could this situation be different, CJ?
Well, what's different is the Four Nations face-off is on the horizon, and that means obviously a break in the schedule. It's almost 4 weeks until Ryan Hartman's due to serve the 10th game of that suspension. And a quirk, as you mentioned, of this system is when it goes through an appeal to Gary Bettman and later a neutral arbitrator, often even when a player gets a reduction in the suspension, it comes after they've already served that suspension. But part of why Hartman pursued this appeal is there's hope that this will be processed before he serves 10 games, and the Wild can certainly use him because they're down some bodies right now, and they're in a tough cap situation as well.
Players that aren't taking part in the Four Nations are set for a nice 12-day break, but how worried are the teams whose stars could be playing throughout the entire tournament, Dregs?
Yeah, there's a level of concern, obviously. I mean, it is going to be an incredibly tight turnaround for those participating and back into the NHL regular season. But you know what, fellas? weirdly, based on how condensed the regular season already is, that has seasoned the players to expect what they're going to have to go through with the Four Nations and then get right back into the grind. You look at Florida, I mean, they have several players participating, but the Florida Panthers have had maybe 3 practices in each of the last 2 months. So it's kind of same old for those that are going into the Four Nations and what they should expect when they come out.
They are the insiders, Chris Johnston, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger.